Thank you so much for joining this webinar, and it is being recorded, so if you do have any colleagues and you think afterwards they might find it useful, then you'll be able to send that link out to them. I thought I'd first of all talk about a little bit about how there's really no right way to manage stress and anxiety and look after our well-being, but what there is, there's your way. So I'm hoping that the things that I share this evening will help you pick and choose the things that might be useful for yourself. So in terms of what we actually mean by stress, you guys probably know as much about this as I do, but it's the kind of definition of stress is actually when our body is under too much pressure, and that amount of pressure that it can't actually take. So it's a little bit like in our body, the alarm bells that start ringing when we think that there is some sort of threat, and that threat could be real or it could be perceived. And unfortunately, our brains haven't really evolved that much in terms of the way that it chooses to alert us to threats. And it still uses the same reactions as if it thinks that we are about to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, even if it's actually an email or a situation that we feel threatened by. So it still kicks out all the adrenaline, it still kicks out all the cortisol, and it puts us into this survival mode, which is the sort of black or white thinking. And it's what happens is the amygdala, which controls our emotional responses, enlarges. The hippocampus responsible for regulating those emotions decreases, as does the prefrontal cortex, which is our rational decision making. So if any of you have read The Chimp Paradox, it's a little bit like there's this chimp in our brain that takes over and almost goes about bull in a china shop trying to fight off all these threats, and actually some of them aren't necessarily that real. So what I want to do this evening is have a look at managing stress and anxiety. I've taken the MSA of managing stress and anxiety and transformed it into me stepping away. And I've likened it to taking an observer perspective as if we're watching a film. So before we settle in to have a little watch of that film, I'm going to invite you to try a short mindfulness technique with me, which is called 7-11 breathing. And the principle behind that is that we breathe in for 7 seconds and breathe out for 11 seconds. When we breathe in, we are triggering the parasympathetic system, the fight or flight. When we breathe out, we're triggering the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest state. So if we breathe out for slightly longer than we breathe in, it's actually overriding the messages that are being sent to the brain about the perceived or real threat. So I'm going to invite everyone to do that with me now. And don't worry so much about the timing. I'll count us in, and it is a long time to breathe in and out for. And if it feels too long, just go back to your normal breathing, but just try and do a little bit longer on the out breath. So if you settle down, make sure you're sitting comfortably, and I'll count us in, and I'll say in, 2, 3, and then out, 2, 3. Okay, and we do this for 3 rounds, and so it totals 1 minute, and we can call that 1 minute of mindfulness. So let's go. We'll breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So hopefully that's brought a short amount of calm. And you can use that technique anywhere. If it was a bit of a struggle in terms of the length, then please try something like 3 breaths in, 6 breaths out, and then move to 4 and 7 and 5 and 8, just so that you've got a little bit of extra on the other side. But it's something that you can do anywhere, and it only takes a minute, and it's sending those calming messages. So in terms of, I talked about the science of stress, and I'm keen to know, how many times those alarm bells are going off for you right now. So I've got a poll here, which I'm going to launch. So it should come up on your screen. How many times are you experiencing this perceived or real threat? You should have a voting button pop up, and then I can just get a gauge for how people are feeling. I've got 3 votes in, 4, 5, 6. A couple more people still to vote. 7. Couple more votes. Any more for any more? Okay, let me end that, and I'll share back the results. So hopefully you can see on your screen from the people that have dialed in, we've got a chunk of people that are actually having those alarm bells once or twice a day, but there are still some people that are feeling like that's never ending. And that's really not a comfortable place to be in, to be constantly in that survival mode and be in that sort of black and white thinking zone. So let's move in to what we can do about that. I will stop sharing those results now. Okay, so I talked about me stepping away, and so the first thing I'm going to talk about are the 5 M's. So I'm hoping you've all got some paper in front of you, and I'm going to invite you in the centre, hopefully if you've got an A4 page, and turn it landscape, and in the centre of the page draw a little matchstick person or something that represents you. And then around that, I'd like you to draw the star shape so that you've got 5 peaks, so 5 points around you. So you're in the centre of a star and you've got 5 points around the outside. And so the first part is the me. So what can I do for myself that's really quick and really simple, and I can do it in pretty much any place. So the first thing I'm going to invite you to draw is movement, so maybe an action man in one of the peaks, one of the points, sorry, of your star. So something that represents movement. So if we can do some sort of movement at least once an hour, and even if that is a case of standing up out of our chair, bending our legs, clicking our fingers, doing an Amy Cuddy power pose, something that just creates a change in our physical state. I mean, in an ideal world, we're going to go around for a walk. We're going to go walk around the surgery, walk around the hospital, walk in our garden, or just around the block. But if you're really limited, just physically standing up from your seat. So that's the first one, M for movement. The second one is mindfulness or meditation. And put that into another point of your star. So the 7-11 breathing that we've just done is a perfect example. It takes 1 minute, or you could use one of your own meditations, or take yourself somewhere quiet and do something mindful, so really concentrate on a task. In terms of meditation, a free app that I use quite a lot is called Insight Timer. Multiple meditations on that, ranging from a minute to 300 minutes, and there's all sorts of different topics for meditation on that. In the third point of your triangle, the next M, draw a couple of musical notes. So music is the third M. And so have your favourite song ready on your phone, and just take 3-4 minutes to go and play your favourite song, and just switch off and just listen to your song for a few minutes. The fourth M is mastery. So this is learning something new or doing something that gives you a sense of achievement. So I had the finishing flag for you know, the Gormy races, yes, I've done it. So if it's a small job on the to-do list, or if it's a small something that you need to do for yourself personally, something which is going to give you a sense of achievement. So that's the fourth M. And the final M is wahahaha. And this is about having some sort of laughter in your day. So whether that's watching some YouTube clips of some animals doing some funny things, whether it's watching some clips of children or loved ones doing something funny, that's something that's going to give you a real laugh. So that's the 5 M's, and the thinking is do one of those things once an hour. And so hopefully you should now have a piece of paper that looks something like this with you in the center. So you've got your 5 M's. And what I'm interested to know, I'm going to put a poll up again, is, let me just find the right question. How many of these are you doing at the moment? So hopefully you've got a poll up on your screens now. So I've got 1 vote in because it's multiple choice, so you can choose as many things as you're already doing. I've got 7 votes in. Any more votes? Okay, I will end that and share the results here. So actually music is one of the biggest ones, and closely followed by movement, and then we've got a little bit of laughter in there, and then in the meditation and the mastery. And the music one's quite an interesting one because a lot of people listen to music when they're commuting into work, and that's their kind of their sort of private space. And we do all have a need for that privacy to consolidate and reflect, and it's something that during lockdown some people have been missing. If they haven't actually been commuting to a normal place of work, they haven't had that private space. So it is something that we need to find time to do. Okay, let me stop sharing those results. Great. And so now we have a star, and we have 5 gaps around that star. And this next piece is the stepping. So the S is for stepping. So all of these things are going to be an S. So the first one into one of the gaps in the star is to say, so maybe a speech bubble. And so when we say I am stressed versus I feel stressed, or even I sense that there is stress around, or is there is tension around, or is there is anxiety, there's a difference there's a different message that gets sent to the brain. When we say I am, it's actually, we almost take on that physicality, whereas if we say it's around us, that's how we can step away from it. And it's interesting that actually some cultures don't have words for things like stress and depression, and so there's a tension around, and actually it's almost like not taking responsibility and not taking it on. So there's something around how we actually talk about it. The next one, in the next gap, I would suggest drawing something like a plane. So this is about standing tall. So how we stand and how our physical presence, when we pull our shoulders back, again, it's sending a message to the brain that we are in control, and it's how that message about the sense of who we are. When we have our shoulders down and hunched, it almost feels like we're taking that weight. So we want to sort of push that weight and drop it off the back of our shoulders with some physical movement. And the plane represents, actually, once we stand tall, we can look down and look around and get a better view of the situation rather than feeling completely locked into it. In the next gap, we will have an eye, that's something representing an eye, and so that's representing what we see. And this is about the truths and the facts of the situation. Often when we get into that survival mode, we think we see things, but actually when we stand back and give it a moment to reflect, what we think we see is not what we actually see. So it's asking what the truths are of the situation. The next one, in the next gap, I would draw a couple of footprints, and this is about sensing and actually taking a moment to acknowledge what we can feel in our bodies. There's a book written by Ruby Wax, and she talks about how each time she went onto stage, she would get this completely jelly leg feeling because she was nervous about standing there. But she wanted to be there. And so her way of actually grounding herself was to say, I can feel my feet on the floor. I know that I'm not going to fall over. I know that nothing bad is going to happen. And you know, this moment will pass. There will be another, the other side of it. She didn't try to get rid of it. And there's another saying, what we resist persists. So the more we think about, we don't want this, the more it kind of comes to try and get us. So we acknowledge it, we sense it, and continue what we're doing, okay? And then the next one is signs. So there's a saying, the body never lies. So the messages that our body sends to us, whether it's headaches, whether it's stomach cramps, whether it's sweaty palms, they're all messages that actually maybe we're doing too much, and maybe it might be a time to get help. Maybe it might be time to talk to somebody else. Maybe it might be time to just take that stand back. So hopefully now in each of your gaps, you have your speech bubble for say it, you have your feet for sensing, you have your plane for standing tall, you have your eye for see, and then you have your signs. So in terms of the signs, I wanted to share with you this pressure performance graph. I don't know if anyone's seen it before. What we've got on the left-hand side is performance, and what we've got across the bottom is the level of pressure. And what the graph is saying is that we need pressure in order to perform. But as you can see, only to a certain point. And when that starts to, you can see the peak of the curve at the end of stretch, the yellow zone, and it goes across into strain, the purple zone. And at that point between the yellow and the purple is where the body will start giving out signs. So it's interesting to work out where you might be on this chart. And sometimes it gets called, on the left-hand side, boredom, rust out, and on the other side with the crisis area, burnout. So we can have equal sort of symptoms, even though it's different circumstances. So I'm interested to know what the signs are that you experience when you get to that zone. So I've got another poll here, which I'm going to launch. So the question is, what are your signs that you know, actually, I'm venturing into that strain zone? So I've got 3 votes out of 9, 5, 6. Any more votes? Okay, let me share back those results with you here. So we can see that actually the biggest area are emotional, so the low mood, loneliness, withdrawn, low motivation, and then closely followed by the physical symptoms. And I guess then it's about, are we actually recognising that and doing something about it? Because if we're in that place, it's likely that we're operating in that survival mode on quite a long-term basis. And that's where the buildup of cortisol can be really dangerous to us. So let me stop sharing those results. So what can we do? What else can we do to help bring ourselves back into that stretch zone where we should be more experiencing a more comfortable experience? Let me get. Okay, so what you do now is draw a bubble around all of your, so you've got your 5 M's, and the 5 S's in terms of what we can do to step away from it. So once you've got that circle, there'll be some things that now that we can talk about around the outside of that, about how we can actually start pushing some of this away. So the first A, I would encourage you to draw a steering wheel. So the A stands for actions, and this is the steering wheel. Imagine if you're driving a car and you have the steering wheel, so you actually have control of the car. And if a hazard comes towards you, you can choose whether to swerve left or whether to swerve right. Now, you might not like either of those choices. It might be the barrier, or it might be the grass verge, but there is always a choice. And being able to see the things that we can actually change our response to can really be helpful. There might be things that are out of our control, but how can we actually change our response to that? So that's the action. The next one, I would draw a magnifying glass, and this stands for actuality. So what actually is going on? And there's a phrase, worry is a misuse of the imagination. So a lot of times we can get into a situation where we imagine that the worst thing is going to happen, sometimes to the extent that we believe it has happened. So if we can use our imagination in a positive way and think about what is the actual situation and what might be the positive possibilities of this situation, that can be really helpful. And it also helps us have that optimistic mindset of, you know, we will get through this when we start to combine some of these things as well. Next is, I would say, a light bulb. Let's draw, and that's representing advice. So contrary to a lot of popular belief, actually asking for help is a strength, and it's how we grow and it's how we get through situations faster. So going and getting some help and talking to people and taking advice, you'll always have to take that advice and factor it into your life and your context, but actually going out and asking for that help is the kind of the first hurdle, if you like. The next A, I would have either some hands clapping or a little smiley face with a halo over the top, and this stands for applause. And actually there is a time for praising the good work that you're doing, that the people that you're working with are doing, and actually taking a moment to say, you know what, we've actually done a good job here, because we can so often spend time thinking about the things that haven't gone quite right. It needs that balance of what actually have we done really well, and how can we learn and take that forward and do more of it. And then the final A is draw a couple of people next to each other, and it stands for all. So we're all in this together. And I've heard various quotes about we're in the same storm but different boats, or we might be in the same boat but we're seeing a different storm. But talking about our experiences is really, really powerful. Wherever I've brought groups of people together to share, even if they're having different experiences, hearing that different people are having different challenges and hearing how they're getting through them can be a really supportive way to get together. So I think I've covered most of the final A's. Let's just check that they are all there on the screen. Yes, okay, fab. So I think if there's only 3 things you can manage to do out of that, then I would call out the mindfulness or meditation, taking some time out to just take a short step back for me. So one of your M's. One of your S's would be sense. So ride the wave, sense what's happening. And that's not in a case of just sensing it and ignoring it, sensing it. And if your body's telling you to stop, listen to those signs. So sense what those signs are, and then take action around those. And then all in it together, the power of talking and having a good conversation is just really, really strong. So I'm going to open up for questions now. I can use the chat box. I don't know if Roma's able to unmute people if they prefer to ask the question verbally. It's very difficult when you're running these webinars because I feel like I'm just talking into a blank space. So feel free to put questions in. We can't unmute on webinars, so sorry. So I've got Sam saying, I'm finding writing is a really helpful way to offload. Yes, it's really, really good. And there's a technique actually called free-form writing, which is a recommendation for helping people sleep. So an hour or a couple of hours before you go to bed, take a blank sheet of paper, pick the pen up and start writing, and don't lift the pen from the paper, just keep writing and keep writing. And it allows you to offload, and it sends a message to the brain that it's completely empty because you've carried on until there's nothing left to write. And I mean, through these situations now as well, journaling's perfect for you know, keeping a track of how you're feeling, and then you can sort of write back on it. So thanks for adding that, Sam. What other questions or thoughts have come up? So I'd be really interested to know, what one action are you going to be taking away from tonight's webinar? I've got a question here. Do you recommend Headspace or Calm apps to patients at all? Yes, so the one that I used, as I mentioned, was Insight Timer, because it's totally free. You can pay for a subscription, but honestly, I've not found the need to. There are many apps that you can get for other sort of measures of well-being. I think it's useful to have a look around and find what works for you. I'm a very paper-based person in that I think the more we have to use so much technology these days, particularly with now needing to work more virtually. If we can get away from devices, then we're reducing the amount of blue light and we're reducing the amount of data upload. So there are some brilliant apps out there. And if that works for you, then brilliant. My own preference is sort of paper-based, but yeah. How do you get people to see a different truth if people are stuck in negative thoughts? So there's different things that you can do around when it's tricky whether someone's actually prepared to share that they've got these negative thoughts, because if they're prepared to share them, then there is a question that can be simply asked as how true is that thought, and actually questioning, is it a thought or a fact or a belief? Often we operate in belief systems, and until we start challenging the belief systems, then it's difficult to see where that thought might be coming from. And it might be a trigger from the past, or it might be a trigger from the environment. So my role is that I'm a coach, and so through coaching conversations I'm able to help people work out what beliefs they've got about themselves, what beliefs they've got about the environment and the situations that they're working in, and create that safe space to explore that. So it might be worth a conversation, you know, with the person to help explore it. I'm keeping my eye on the chat box here as well. So we've got any tips for when waking up in the morning, feeling overwhelmed when facing the day, and I've got actuality needs to feature more in my stress zone as it's easy to quickly convince myself of worst case scenarios. Yes, yes, it's very easy. So I'll do the worst case scenarios and then I'll come back to the overwhelm one. Oh, there's another question that I think I might have missed. Let me just scoot back up to that. I think many doctors have, sorry, my screen's not very big. I think many doctors have long-term stress and it's causing burnout. Is that what that one's? I think these techniques will be useful for many work with looking after doctors. Great, yes, yes. Convincing myself of worst case scenarios. So with the worst case scenarios, we can spend quite a lot of time conjuring up what the worst is that could happen. And actually, I spend a bit of time pushing my clients on what is the worst situation. And I sometimes get people to take it to real extremes. And then the question is, if that actually happens, what are you going to do? And this is about having a bit of a contingency plan. So in driving terms, I've got an analogy with a car. So a lot of the things I talk about with a car, it's what is your spare wheel? So if that happens, that worst case scenario, what is your spare wheel? What are you actually going to do? Because sometimes we don't get that far. We're just worrying about that worst thing. But once we've got something in our back pocket that says, if that does happen, this is how I'm going to handle it, it can ease that fear, because it's a sort of a tonic to go with it, to say, right, I've got this real worry, but it's okay, because this is what we're going to do if it happens. And it's like, right, let's put a little blanket over you, because that'll be okay if that happens. So that would be the thing about worst case scenarios. Waking in the morning and feeling overwhelmed with facing the day. I can 100% relate to that. My background to why I'm actually sitting here today running this webinar is that I didn't look after myself very well, and learned a lesson the hard way, and spent years and years waking up feeling overwhelmed by the day, going in any way, but I have no idea how I actually got through when I look back at it, because I was totally in survival mode that whole time. And I find that I give time to myself before I do anything else. So all of my notifications on all of my devices are turned off. So when I get up in the morning, there's nothing on my phone. I don't look at my emails. I don't do any sort of social media. I do some sort of exercise, whether that's a walk or a home workout, and I do a meditation, and I bring myself down to calm, and then I'll start, and I choose, because those notifications aren't there, I choose which one I look at first. So I might choose to check in on WhatsApp, because that might be where my family stuff is, and then I might go to the emails. But it's always about putting some time for me before that day starts, and that I find that really helps. And another thing about waking up in the morning overwhelmed is, at the end of the day, the end of the working day, I work through what it is that I want to focus on first that next day, and I work on what it is that I want to get done in that next day. What are the important things? What are the urgent things? So that when I finish the day, my brain is set into the mode of, I know what I've got to do tomorrow, and I've managed it so that, in theory, I shouldn't get overwhelmed with it. Sometimes the body overtakes that, even as much planning that you've done, and that's where they're putting the time in for me first, because then I know that at least I've looked after myself before I start going out trying to work on the other things. Is that helpful? Great, good, okay. Have I missed any questions? So I've got had a career break after near burnout, decided to start a website for doctors called Permitted to Pause, trying to make that my mantra. Yes, there is something about having a mantra and what it is that you believe in to keep you kind of going. Yeah. Plan for the next day sounds particularly helpful. Yes. And another point around that is to actually do that plan a little while before you actually finish, so that if you start making that plan and you identify something that you haven't done and you should have done or wanted to do, then you've got a little bit of time to do that. So it's building in, again, your spare wheel, a bit of contingencies time. So say you finish at 7 o'clock, at 6:30, press pause and work out what it is that you've done, what's carrying over to the next day, what your tasks are, and then if anything crops up, you've just got half an hour to do something about it. And it was interesting, I actually was coaching a GP last week, And he said that on one of his long days, he finishes the session at 3:30, and essentially said that he works until he gets brain fog, and then he has to pack up. And he said, at 3:30, I stop and get a cup of tea, and I just plough on until I've done as much as I can do. And when we actually unpicked it, in his mind, he was saying, because I've got this cup of tea, that's my break. But actually he wasn't taking a break. He was convincing himself he was, because he's got this cup of tea. So what we actually discussed was that sitting down, having that cup of tea and having an actual break and not looking at the screens, and then sitting and planning, right, what do I really need to do in this next few hours? And we changed the time. We said we will allow until 6:30, and that hour is the buffer. And so that's what he's gone away and implemented that break. So we all need a recharge through the day. It's a little bit like an electric car. Electric car can't go for more than 8 hours without taking a break, and we think we can plow on. Or, you know, mobile phone battery, as soon as that starts running down, we rush to plug it in, and yet we sometimes forget to do that for ourselves. So hopefully that's helpful as well. Someone doing coaching qualifications are really useful. Yes, or the power of coaching, amazing. So you'll enjoy that. Thanks, Joe. Practical advice. Yeah, I'm hoping to just pop really quick, simple things that can be applied rather than the theory. And that's the other thing as well. A lot of us know the theory, but it's turning it into practice and finding out what that looks like for us as individuals. Okay, what other questions have we got? I can't see any more coming in the chat panel. Trying to get a team more positive, but not finding it very easy. So sometimes it can be worth opening up the negativity, and then asking what would, if you were forced and had to describe this situation in a positive way, how would you describe it? And, you know, not necessarily telling people to be more positive, and, you know, having a positive outlook, well, being able to frame things positively is one of the resilient techniques that will help us through. But it's about being optimistic. So having a positive frame is not about being happy all the time. It's about being optimistic and seeing that there is a way to get through this, and seeing that there's another side. There's actually a brilliant podcast by Michael Bungay-Stanier, and it's called We Will Get Through This. And it's specifically designed for these current COVID times. Each session is only about 20 to 30 minutes long, and he talks to the people that he knows, that he's gathered over his career, that are experts in resilience. And so there's some really, really good conversations that he's having in there, if you fancy looking that up. Yeah. Hopefully that's helpful on the team side of things, Karen. I know it's not easy to take people on a journey. Yeah. Okay, I'm keeping my eye on the chat in case any more is coming through. I can't see any at the moment. So in terms of tell me how to spell his name, let me pop that in the chat here. Michael, oops. Okay, oops. I've got a bit of fumble fingers going on here, so excuse me. So he's been named as one of the top 50 in the Thinkers. I think it's a Forbes top thinkers. He's top coach in Canada. Yeah, MBS Works on Google. You'll find it there. He's got lots of freebies as well. He's got something going on at the moment called A Year of Living Brilliantly. So yeah. Fab. Another one, this is Brene Brown. She's done a lot of work on vulnerability, and she's got a new podcast called Unlocking Us. And my favourite session on hers is one with Mark Beckett on feelings. that's a really, really amazing session as well. I'm just checking there's something come up in the Q&A. So his name again is Michael Bungay Stanier. If you just type into Google mbs.works, you will find him there. The podcast is called We Will Get Through This. Spell his name, so it's earlier in the chat, but oops. Fab, okie dokie. So in terms of resources, just a reminder what's available through the NHS, and the free bits and pieces are there, but that hashtag Our NHS People will lead you to those tools there as well. And please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. They're the two places that I tend to post most things. So I'll share if I think of articles that will be useful to people, or if I'm running sessions. So I do work for the Wessex LMC, and I've done some work with Cornwall and Devon, and all of their events are online now. So if you want to sort of dig a bit deeper into some of this stuff, then check out some of the courses. The next one I'm doing is on the 2nd of July with Wessex. That's called Reset, Rebalance and Revitalise. I also am a practitioner in the RAW tool, which stands for Workplace Resilience and Wellbeing. So it takes a psychometric measure of your resilience, which is a snapshot in time, and then it talks through tools and techniques to make improvements for yourself as well. And also look at the things you're doing really well, because there will be things that you're already doing really well to look after yourselves, and it's about recognizing the strengths that you've got as well. So yeah, they're some of the things that I do. So I really hope tonight has been helpful for everybody. Like I say, connect with me, feel free to ask me more questions. I'm always up for a conversation on resilience and wellbeing and coaching, of course. So I wish you a good evening.